Ladies and gentlemen, the Brit Pack is back, and I've brought a couple of friends with me. Gorgeous George and Goze, the OGs from MMA Junkie Radio and the Triple G Show, joining me for something a little bit new that we're going to call the Brit Pack United Nations. Sort of hands across the water, if you like. It's quite a big bit of water, the Atlantic Ocean, but there we go. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to do this on the regular, hopefully, looking ahead to what's coming up in the world of MMA and maybe chucking in a few little talking points along the way. Guys, first off, how's it going over there? First off, are you ready for the World Cup? You qualify for the World Cup. Are you ready for your group stage exit at the hands of England in the first round? That's what you need to know.
Yeah, you got to remember we have a couple lifelines though, because we were born here in the United States, but our mother's Peruvian and our father comes from Mexican descent. So you can catch us on the US side and it's going to sting. But we could always kind of hang that, oh yeah, but we're rooting for Peru over here. So we got a couple of lifelines. But yeah, George, the U.S. has been kind of garbage. They're not. They were better a couple World Cups ago, where they could actually compete with some of the top teams. But this team is really hot and cold. I don't see them making much noise.
Simon, it's the equivalent of when somebody comes up from the championship to the Premier League, and you were to ask those teams, hey, how do you feel? Can you make a run at the title? Let's be serious. No, you can't. You're just happy to be there, right? And it's great, and it's more TV money. And maybe they get into, the top 10. That would be great. But for the most part, with U.S., Mexico, Peru, you just want to make it to the quarterfinals, and then you want to give some team a hell of a game. And I think you can board that plane and come back from Qatar if you go, saying, okay, that was fun. But nobody's saying, okay, I'm gone for the next month. I'm staying all the way through the final. Yeah, we keep it real.
It's going to be weird because it's in November as well. Normally the World Cup is in sort of June, July time, because it's far too hot in Qatar for it to be held at that point in the year.
During Thanksgiving. Yeah, it's around the time of Thanksgiving here in the United States, and it'll stretch into the winter holiday, Christmas, and I think it'll end before New Year. But yeah, I'm digging it, to tell you the truth. It's better for the players, but I'm digging it because it'll just give me, I guess, a chance to watch it at another time of the year. And what it's going to do to the domestic leagues is going to give them a little bit of a break that they've looked for in the past to see if it works. I don't know if you've heard about that. I know the English Premier League, a lot of the managers that come over, they go, hey, man, we're used to kind of like a 3-week break. What happened? And they stay busy in the English Premier League. But I think there's going to be some sort of a semblance of that. So I want to see how that pans out.
Yeah, it's completely different with MMA, right? I know we've got, actually, for those listening and watching this, we're recording this on Wednesday, April 20th, probably about 2 3/4 hours before the start of the PFL's first show of 2022. They're kind of the anomaly, right? They actually have a season, which is a very unique thing in MMA. MMA is just a year-round thing. And you guys have been covering this sport forever, right? You've been talking about the sport on the mic for as long as I can remember, that's for sure. And it is non-stop, isn't it? You might get the odd week off here and there, but how do you even go about planning your time off when it's just a non-stop hamster wheel of work, isn't it? Covering this sport, it's mad.
Yeah. So I think the only thing I've ever noticed that's become a bit of a break is the UFC used to have their traditional long year-end show to match New Year's weekend, and they got away from that. And now what they seem to do is something in the first or second week of December, maybe a fight night that follows it in the teens, like the 13th, the 19th, something. And then it's like, okay, the rest, everyone seems to go on a bit of a holiday for Christmas or whatever. And then through the New Year's, there's no more New Year's Eve show. And then if you'll notice, they start to come back in like that third week of January. So we do get 3 weeks to a month, if we're lucky. No Bellator, no UFC, but nothing compared to like the comparisons we were using earlier, Simon, of a sports league that will have like a proper 2 or 3 months off. Even the leagues that run long, they'll have a proper 2 or 3 months off where you can really, really unplug, unwind. And so yeah, PFL does do it that way. the athletes that we've covered have told me that they really like it. And I guess I kind of like it, but I only like it because it serves for our coverage of PFL, but the other ones are keeping us busy. But I wish they could all kind of do it. Now, that said, how many times did we go, yes, nothing, okay, the pay-per-view's done, cool, we got the week off. And then on Thursday I'll be telling Goze, so now what? You kind of you get a little spoiled, and you kind of wish there was some fights going on somewhere, but for the most, I think it's outweighed by good than bad to have weeks off, for sure.
I think it's almost impossible to follow the sport at this point, because you're asking so much out of a person, especially if they have a family, if they have a girlfriend or whatever, because now, let's say you have a Bellator on a Friday night, right? You have a UFC on a Saturday, PFL during the week. Sometimes there's a Dana White's Contender Series or an Ultimate Fighter. That's a lot of time. Like, when you think about it, you have your favorite team in the NFL, maybe you follow them. That's one game. And then if you just want to catch some of the other games, it's mostly Sunday, right? They do have their Thursday game, their Monday night game, but they don't ask that much of you. MMA asks a lot of you. And most MMA fans come from boxing, so if you add in boxing and all that, it's so much. So really the sacrifice that I've had to do, Simon, is some of them I just don't watch live, because I can sit through a whole card 8 hours, or I can just wait till the next day and just go through all them little lulls that they have in that production and do it in about 2, So sometimes I have to do that, but it is very difficult.
Yeah, and imagine that when most of the action is happening in the early hours of the morning. That's kind of what it's like for us poor sods over here in the UK. Just even though we've got a relatively sort of low heat UFC fight night on Saturday night, the last 2 fight nights haven't been the most star-studded events in the world. Obviously, we've got a big summer coming up. We've got a big week of fights, though. I mean, I mentioned a minute ago, we've got PFL kicking off tonight, but we've got one championship on Friday. We've got a Bellator double header coming up this weekend from Hawaii. And I know Nolan King, Matt Erickson must be just absolutely loving it at this point, just getting over there to Hawaii. They're actually on the ground over there, aren't they, this week?
Yes.
Yeah. They're covering it, and then they're covering Hawaii in their spare time. All the food pictures are killing me.
My heart bleeds. It absolutely does. But yeah, so we've got the Bellator double header, and we've got the UFC, and over here in Wembley Stadium we've got Tyson Fury against Dillian White in front of what's going to be 94,000 people at Wembley Stadium. That is going to be an absolute barn burner of a fight. Dillian White, by the way, former training partner of a certain Jimmy Manoa. They used to train together. So, but Dillian can really bang. That'll be a good fight. But of all the fights that we've got coming up this weekend, is there one event, or is there a particular fight that sort of leaps off the page to you and go, okay, we've got all these events coming up. I absolutely have to make sure I am sat in prime position in front of my TV for that one. What do you reckon, Goze?
I think it's one of the Bellator. So one of the Bellator cards is not that good, but I'm a sucker for Grand Prix, and especially that bantamweight Grand Prix. I know it took a few hits, but I'm just a sucker for it, and I like the matchups. So for me, that's what I'm looking forward to the most. The UFC cards, it's kind of hard to have a bad UFC card, but honestly, like, it's just so different from one week to the next. The type of talent that you see. But in particular, I want to see that bantamweight Grand Prix go off. And I'll be honest, I'm excited for PFL week 1.
What do you reckon, George?
I like them all, to be honest. Like, none of them suck. Let's get that clear. But I like them for different reasons. So PFL, the season format with the points totally remind me of EPL, for example. And what I like about it is now that they're starting to have names like Rory McDonald and Anthony Pettis and Jeremy Stevens and a few more that have come over, along with the homegrown talent, it makes it more exciting to relate to other fans that are going to be tweeting and watching, and our audience that listens. So, but what's cool is those high profile free agents that came over, they didn't work out too well last year. And, you know, some of them might be on the tail end of their career and that was the place that would pay them. Who knows? But I thought, I thought Anthony Pettis was very honest when he said, man, I was blown away. I wasn't prepared. I am preparing this year for that season. You know, kind of almost sounded like a fat cat coming out of college football that played his 11 games but wasn't used to a 17-game season, plus all the responsibilities and no frat parties. You know what I mean? Like, I'm all grown up now. So I want to see how some of those athletes now give it a go the second time around and how they adjust. It's their first week. Who's not up for an opening weekend? Bellator, I agree with Goze. It'll be the Grand Prix athletes that I'll be watching the most and most excited for. Arlene Blencowe did earn her second shot at Cyborg. I think Cyborg all day, honestly, but I think Blencowe's a good fighter for that weight class. And she earned it. She won 3 fights to get there. And then lastly, UFC just finds a way to deliver one way or another. It's not like you said, Simon. There's not a lot of recognizable names. They're stretching it a little bit with that main event. But one thing you can do with UFC is live bet, and that's why I like to watch it from start to finish, is because of that.
Do you get much margin on live betting? I mean, I've worked in betting for a long time, sort of long before I even started covering MMA, and it's a 2-horse race, right? A fight is a 2-horse race. And unless you're going down the round betting route or the method of victory, there's not a lot of juice in it for you, is there? I mean, there's the margins are so, except for the recent pay-per-view where the odds were absolutely wild and all over the place. Some huge underdogs in that on that fight card. I mean, if you backed Aljamain Sterling on that particular evening, you'd be buying the beers for the next few weeks, I would imagine. But do you find much value in MMA betting, George? Because I sort of look at it, and unless the odds makers just get it plain wrong based on what I'm looking at, I find it hard to pick legitimate value out of it.
Okay, so for example, I was on Sterling pretty much all week on our staff picks and even on our watch along, which I know you were watching because your name came up. We were like, man, poor Simon better be hanging in there, pots of coffee, you know, because I know you were tuning in. But I remember saying, I'm stating it right now, I'm going with Aljo, right? Why? Because I just felt like when you talk about that word value, what was taught to me by the great Joey Odessa, odds maker extraordinaire in combat sports, he says the value can only have value if the fighter can win. So you can't just say like so and so versus someone who never loses. I guess Habib. I guess he's bound to lose. No one goes 30-0. His time is up. No, you have to find reasons why the other person can win, and if they do and match the discrepancy of the odds, then sure, put something on it. Don't put the mortgage on it. The other guy's never lost, but put something on it because that spices things up, right? And I knew Sterling is just amazing on the ground. He's really, really tough on the ground. He's heavy on the ground, and I tune in from every once in a while for that Scraps podcast that he has. It's called the Weekly Scraps or something like that, and in it, he's very honest, even with his teammates, with himself, when he does something wrong. So I saw a mature cat that was going to see, he came out of the gate too quick in the first fight. He started to tire, throw in the stuff that he said about he didn't properly, nourish himself that day or whatever, which, I wasn't sure about the excuse or not. And I just felt like, you know what, this guy only needs to win 3 of the 5. He could get knocked out because Jan's legit. I get it, but he ain't going to get submitted. But what if he can win 3 of those and hang in there, which is kind of what he did if you think about it. We might have something, Jan has been tough to stop. He's been tough to take down, but I thought if anyone can do it and anyone can learn from the mistakes, it was Aljamain Sterling. I'm glad that it played out kind of how I envisioned it. Now, live betting, the nice thing about it is within about a minute, a lot of your secrets come out. Did you really get that road work in? You know what I mean? Did you really, really work on that wrestling or that takedown defense or whatever? A lot of fighters just tend to break after a round or whatever, and that's revealed to us in the first minute to first round. And what you're hoping for is that whoever is the big favorite maybe stumbles early on and brings these odds down a little bit more to like some sort of a pick'em, right? Or those traditional cardio kings, maybe they nicked that first round that they usually lose, and now you think, oh, they only got to win one of the next two, but my guy's got a lot of wind left. That guy's already tiring, so you're just kind of watching for that type of stuff.
So what's your biggest win on MMA, Goze?
Ever?
Well, yeah. I mean, have you had to parlay them up with other sporting events and sort of?
It's a parlay that I could only talk to you guys about off the air, but it was a 12-0 night, I believe, UFC 139, the one with Hendo and Shogun. I was there in person. Many witnesses know about the undefeated night because I didn't necessarily talk about the parlay or parlays, but I was telling them who I had, and then when they realized, holy cow, you're 7-0, wow, you're 8-0, you know, and we got to the eventual Hendo and Shogun, which was close, but that one came in as well, so that one clearly was my biggest one.
I'd say mine was somewhere in the 700 range, but it was a parlay, and I remember it had to do with UFC 199.
Oh, you know what's another one goes? I can't remember if you cashed in, but it was the one where Bigfoot beat Overeem and Joey Varner was guest hosting for a while. And the other Jason Brazilian? Ford, we all did that 5-team parlay that had Aldo beating Edgar. And we actually, some of us hedged on that one. And then the Nogueira beat Rashad. Yeah, that was one that was like literally $25 paid 5,000 or $50 paid 5,000. Like it was all kinds of long shots, and a lot of us hit that. But that still doesn't beat out my UFC 139 card.
But the theme of that one was every fight had a Brazilian in it on the main card, right? So I think Joey said, let's just do all Brazilians, and it was 4-0 going into Edgar Aldo. And so you had that decision to make. Do you hedge right now and bet the other way? That way you're guaranteed something. Or are you walking away with roughly, it was about 5,000 something, right, George?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Edgar was like a good plus 300 dog or something like that. So, you know, we were risking 50. So all we were saying was like, well, let's put like 300 on Edgar. That way, if that hits, that'll hit for 900, cancel the 50. You still take home 850, have something to show for it. And if we lose that, then, okay, we lost 300 from the 5,000. Like we were trying to balance that thing out a little bit.
But that was at the arena. We
were at the arena. And you know how it is when 15,000 people are all trying to suck up the same bandwidth. Sometimes you're like, come on already. The bet won't go through. And you hear the walkout music and all that. So we were able to get, you know, hedge some of it, but everybody still made a great payday.
It's mad. You talk about everyone jumping on the Wi-Fi. That's UFC London every time. The media Wi-Fi always dies. Even though it's the O2 Arena, which is O2 is a big telecommunications company in the UK. Wi-Fi in there is absolutely abysmal, and you end up on the public Wi-Fi with 15,000 other people who are live streaming or doing whatever, and you're trying to file your copy. It's not fun.
Have you ever seen when a media member gives it away? It's usually when a fight falls off and they go, here's the actual card. So they take a picture of it, but at the top it'll say like UFC 1 password for media or whatever, and they give it to the entire arena. That's been terrible too.
It happens. Yeah. It's Wi-Fi. I don't care how good the viewing angle is. The fights can be so. Just give me good Wi-Fi. I don't care about anything. If I'm in the building, just make the Wi-Fi work, and then I'm a happy man. But UFC London was absolutely nuts, by the way. Absolutely nuts. And I've covered a lot of shows live, and UFC London, the recent one, is probably in my top three or four best events I've ever attended in MMA. Wow. I think UFC 189 might still be my number one, which is my first ever Vegas show. I'd covered events in the UK, but I'd never even been to the States before. Flew over to Vegas. UFC 189, McGregor versus Mendes. Sinead O'Connor singing Conor McGregor to the ring. Absolute bedlam. That might have been number one. UFC 199 was a special one. I was pretty much the only British journalist in the building when Bisping won the title, so that was a special one. But UFC London, honestly, for like a sheer build, I wasn't at that famous Dublin event, the Diego Brandao Conor McGregor one, where that grew into a complete crescendo as well. It felt a bit like that, although I wasn't in the arena for that one. Everyone who was there that I spoke to said it had a similar feel, but it was a bigger crowd in London. And the atmosphere in that building was absolutely nuts. I mean, when Molly landed the elbow, the place just went absolutely ballistic. But Mo Mikhaev, first fight of the night, this is a 15,000-seater arena. I reckon there were about 9,000 or 10,000 people in there for the first fight of the night. And they took the roof off for him. It was I don't know how it came across on TV, but it looked from cage side, it was a very, very special night.
So check this out. I actually happen to have my favorite one, my press pass right here.
Pride. Oh wow.
That was
Thomas
my favorite
and Mac.
one.
Yeah. Is that building still up, the Thomas and Mac? Are they still using that for stuff now, or is it something else?
No, they still have it. I mean, primarily UNLV basketball. That's where I went. UNLV. It's primarily used for basketball and concerts and boxing. But
it used to be boxing when I was growing up. It used to be world title fights from the Thomas and Mack Center in Vegas. I remember that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But,
it kind of became a go-to spot after Caesar's Palace got rid of their outdoor arena. But for a while, it was the Caesar's Palace outdoor arena, which was a thing of beauty, man, because, we have wind. We get the monsoons from time to time, but luckily a lot of the time they'll sweep through and and then they're out. And a hot Vegas night, perfect for boxing. Now, the boxers might think differently, you know what I mean? But they got accustomed to it, and it was it went on for a long time. A lot of the greats from the 80s did it specifically. There was one incident with the famous fan man, the guy that descended from heavens and paused the fight night. But other than that, it's very historical. It's no longer there. Goze and I actually saw WrestleMania there as well.
Wow. Yeah, no, it's not one I've ever been to. I mean, I've done the MGM Grand. I've never done an event at Mandalay Bay. They don't seem to do them there anymore. They've got the T-Mobile deal now, so everything is there. But the first Vegas show I did was probably the best. That was at MGM Grand. I kind of miss the MGM Grand. I like it there. I like the fact that you come out of the arena and you're straight in the middle of the casino again. And the atmosphere after that McGregor fight was absolutely insane. But
I want to take this opportunity to bust your balls, Simon, a little bit.
Oh, go for it. Yeah,
to your own audience. If they did have a fight night at the Mandalay Bay, would you really go? Because you haven't seemed to pay us much of a visit when we were at the Mandalay Bay. That's the home of MMA Junkie Radio for 11 years. And how many times would I have wanted? You should have been there at least 20 times over the last 10 years that we've known you. And I barely even see you when you're in Vegas. You lose my number. It's like a Phil Collins song.
All right, okay. In pleas of mitigation, I did not bring my lawyer with me, so obviously this is all off the record. But yeah, no, I think I've done Vegas 10 or 12 times over the course of my career. So 20 visits might have been a bit of a stretch. Twice a week, I suppose it could have been done. But 99% of the time when I've been over there as a team of one. You're used to being. I know I've worked with Junkie for a little bit, but you're used to working with Junkie and the massive staff that you have there. We're talking about a dozen or so staffers. I go to these events, or have been over the course of my career. One guy editing or shooting video, editing video, recording podcasts, interviewing, writing for print, writing for websites. All of it to start with on a crappy Chromebook, which was which was all I was given to start with. A Chromebook, and I was shooting video on an iPod and editing it on iMovie on an iPod. That's how I started out first. When I covered Bisping winning the title, we had the press conference, that famous press conference with him and Rockhold going back and forth after the fight. I've actually got on my bookshelf.
Achieve, believe, and all that?
Sorry?
Is that the achieve, believe, conceive, or something like that?
That was the pre-fight. the post fight, he was just giving it to Rockhold in the press conference afterwards. But yeah, I've actually got the like the banner that goes on the front of the podium, actually on my bookshelf over there from that event. Someone,
nice.
one of the PR girls took it down and said, "You need to take that back with you." But after the press conference, they led Bisping out of a side door into what was like a service area where they sort of bring up the like the drinks trucks and the catering trucks and all of that. And he sort of waved at me and sort of ushered me backstage and said, "Let's do an interview. Let's do an interview." And all I had is my iPod. And so I'm like, "Okay, you stand still. I'll interview you like this." He said, "No, you're not doing that." Audie, called Audie Attar, his manager, who's doing the whole Steven Spielberg with the camera, doing all this with the iPod. And I was stood in shot with him, interviewing him. He had all his family around him. He had Jason Perillo heckling him from the side. And it was a really cool moment. And
Nice.
but yeah, I had no kit whatsoever. I was just flying by the seat of my pants back then. But yeah, flying solo, George. So next time I'm over, which is going to be this summer for International Fight Week, I will absolutely come and do Junkie Radio with you. If you're in the studio again, I know you aren't back in there at the moment, but if you're back in there and I'm over, let's do it. I'm absolutely up for that. So
as you were talking, I got a text from Mandalay Bay, the sports book, and they posted odds. Will Simon Head be there this summer, as he says so, plus 1,000? So they don't have
it's a
too
lock.
much faith in him.
It's a lock. Put your mortgage on it. It's a lock. But yeah, no, you know, I love talking fights with you guys. That's why we're doing this, right? So, but yeah, I'd never had the it sounds really bad to say I didn't have the time, but honestly I did not have the time to come over and do it at the time. But yeah, it's something I would love to do.
And trust me, you're not the only guy. Abby Subhan, I'm gonna give it to him as well, man. Yeah, I might have a couple Hawaiians jump him outside of Extreme Couture or something, but he's been over a few times. Still nothing.
Yeah, well, he's coming over to Vegas with me this summer. We're actually rooming together on the trip. So I'll grab him by his ear and drag him along with me.
Even old Chael's son, and we only got him to stop at the studio one time, but he would at least 5-6 times he's gone by, knocked on the window and just waved, and I'm like, okay, I'll take that. And then he just kind of goes on and goes about his business. I try and pull him in, but he's a big star or whatever. But finally we did get him in studio once.
Besides me, obviously, who's the one guest that you've always wanted to have on that you haven't been able to sort of snag yet?
Not because we haven't tried, but Anderson Silva.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, which is weird because we've had him in the studio, just not on the show, but Nick Diaz.
No, he's been on the show.
But not in studio.
Oh, not in studio. Yeah, he hasn't been in studio, but he has been on the show. We used to get him to end every single spot he did with us by saying, "Hey, I ain't no bitch." That was his thing. "Hey, Nick, any words on the way out?" "Yeah, I just want to say, man, I ain't no bitch." And he laughed. He didn't like it for a while. He was like, "Don't make me say that." And I'm like, well, it's kind of your thing. And then he'd always wind up saying it anyway. But yeah, Anderson Silva, I want to explain. We could probably get him on. It's just once we got in that studio, we really wanted to get him in studio. So all those times that we probably could have done something on the phone with the translator, without whatever, we just didn't. And so he's kind of been our unicorn. Now, that said, since we've been out of the studio consistently for the last few years, you got your Volkanovskis of the world, the young fighters that have kind of come through, and now they're at the top of the sport. Zhang Wei Li, a few others. We have a little bit of catching up to do with some of them.
Yeah, is the plan to be back in the studio every now and again moving forward? I know, obviously, the world has changed, right? And as a result, everybody is a lot more geared up for recording this sort of stuff remotely, right? We're doing that right now, so the need to do it isn't quite as great as maybe it was. But is that still the goal, to sort of do some, even if it's like showpiece kind of shows, sort of tentpole events, if you like, from Mandalay Bay?
Yeah, I think that sort of stuff can work. It's just like you said, the world has changed, and it's so much harder to get people to do that stuff. And then on our side, the amount of equipment and stuff that needs to be transported over there, set up, then you got to take away some of Kenny's time, right, to do it. when it can just be done this way, you know? So yeah, it's kind of difficult, but there'll be these certain times where I think it makes sense, and we'll probably do it that way.
Back in
Yeah.
the day, it was exclusively ours, so no one else went in there aside from the yearly Super Bowl invasion or the Breeders' Cup, maybe March Madness. They'd give us plenty of time and notice, so we could kind of put our stuff away. But now there's a bunch of shows that rotate, so it's more of a bland background that can be filled in by people bringing in and decorating it or filling it out however they want. Whereas before it was a strong MMA presence, strong MMA junkie presence. So it'll no longer be like those days. We have access to it, but now we have to put in like a little bit of a formal request Tuesday between 4 and 6. Okay, but it wasn't like before where 10 p.m. if Ed Soares were to say, "Hey, I got you, Anderson Silva. We'll meet you at the studio at 11 p.m." All we had to do was go down there, flip a switch, it was on. Now it's like Goze said, lugging stuff, tweaking stuff, calibrating stuff, because each show is different. You got satellite radio, you got terrestrial radio, you got podcasts, and then everything that keeps innovating with video technology. It's just a lot of plugging and playing and this and that, and you can't just do it. Everyone's got to have their own mixer. It's just different now.
Yeah. Yeah. And while we're on the topic of Vegas and events and things happening, before we sort of go on and talk about the weekend fights and sort of wrap things up, I know you mentioned it on one of your shows previously. I want to get your views on the fact Formula One is coming to Las Vegas. This is a big deal. The Formula One has been huge in Europe forever, right? It's maybe not so big in the States. They've had races, like Long Beach used to host races. They actually hosted a Formula One Grand Prix in the Caesars car park. Caesars Palace car park. It was one of the worst places they could ever have held a race. It was like a little go-kart track, and the race really wasn't very good. And it didn't really have the pizzazz that a Las Vegas race should have. This Las Vegas race is going to be mad. They're going to completely resurface the strip. They're going to take all the lumps and bumps and manhole covers and everything. They're going to completely smooth it out. And they're going to race all the way down the strip. It's going to be quite the scene. And the amount of people that are going to fly in for this is going to be absolutely nuts. And I know, like with Drive to Survive, the documentary that I told you guys about months ago, or maybe even a year or two ago, the sport has just completely exploded stateside in popularity. I think so many people are getting switched onto it now. What is the buzz like for Formula One stateside and in Vegas, especially now you've got this race coming up next November, I think.
I saw a press release about 3 weeks ago, maybe a month. And when they showed us what it would look like and what streets it would be at, a lot of that was getting some retweets. A lot of it was like in your local news, television and print, your Las Vegas Weekly. So we had kind of like an initial burst, similar to like maybe when a city's announced as the next host of a World Cup or Olympics. People talk about it for a while, and then it just dies out in that news cycle. But I agree with you. It's gotten bigger. More people talk about it. More people that I know talk about it that I didn't even know were kind of peeking at it. The time difference hurts it a little bit, but still, it has picked up a lot of traction. It's very similar, bringing it back to football, Simon, because I was telling Goze prior to us getting knocked out and having to wear this Atletico Madrid scarf in honor of Danny Segura, we had Champions League on CBS, like big CBS. None of those, your general hospitals or One Life to Live or all these like 50-year-long soap operas, no game shows, nothing. Champions League was on CBS. That was huge. That told me, along with English Premier League on Channel 4, which is NBC. Those are our big stations, CBS, NBC, ABC, and Fox, that a lot of sports are headed in a new direction. And to compare, for example, baseball's been on cable TV. The World Series used to be on one of those big networks, and now it's been like on TBS or whatever. Same with the NHL. So there's been a little bit of a shift, and I think you can throw Formula One as a sport that's definitely moving up, and I can definitely say that I think golf is starting to slowly fade out. It seems like when they do their analytics, the average age is definitely getting older. For the ones I heard were golf and baseball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's been a little bit of a buzz. We actually just had an interview with AJ McKee, and he was.
I saw that.
At first, we thought he was joking, but it seems like he's taking it kind of serious. He wants to actually try and do that at some point. He bought himself a little simulator and everything. So, actually, I wanted to ask you, Simon, if you know, because he just kind of throws it out. I mean, he's a millionaire now, right? So this is chump change for him. But how much would a Formula One simulator cost? I feel like that would cost a lot of money.
A Formula One simulator would cost a lot of money. If you want to actually be a race driver, you would need, AJ would need to win a few more Grand Prix. Let's put it that way. Like Grand Prix in terms of fighting Grand Prix to load up the bank account. It is not a cheap sport to get into. You look on, even in Formula One, right, where you would assume that the best of the best are going to be on the grid. And at the front of the grid, it is, right? The guys who are in the top 10, top 12 cars are the best race drivers on the planet, bar none. They are the best because it is the pinnacle of the sport. They're like fighter pilots on wheels, these guys. The guys towards the back of the grid, in the teams that perhaps aren't as well funded, they tend to have one driver who's like super talented, and the second driver is what is often known in the sport as a pay driver. And that's someone who has come up and they have a lot of sponsorship money attached to them. There's a team, the Aston Martin team. It's owned by a guy called Lawrence Stroll, who brought, I think he brought like Ralph Lauren into Canada, and he's a multi-millionaire or maybe even a billionaire. His son is the second driver in that team. He's talented. He's very good. But the guy's driving alongside is a 4-time world champion, right? So that's what we're dealing with. And even the Red Bull team, you've got Max Verstappen, who is the current world champion. He's the son of a former Formula One driver. So he got his leg up early. And his teammate is a guy called Sergio Perez, who got his break because he got a load of money. He's Mexican. He got a load of money. I'm trying to think. He's a really famous Mexican millionaire or billionaire.
Carlos Slim?
That's the guy. He bankrolled him to get into the sport. And he started out driving at one of the lower end teams as a pay driver. But he's turned out to be very, very good. And once you're in, then your talent proves yourself. And then he's been able to get himself better drives. And now he's with arguably the best team or the second best team on the grid. So yeah, it's not a cheap sport to get into. And like, give you an idea, there's one of the other sports I'm massively into is MotoGP, which is effectively Formula One on motorbikes, right? These things are rocket ships. And there's a guy his name is Valentino Rossi. I think he's won like 9 world championships. He's genuinely known as the GOAT of motorcycle racing. He retired at the end of this past season. He has always wanted to move across into 4-wheeled racing. He does rallying and rallycross racing. And him and Lewis Hamilton, if you look on YouTube, you probably find it. Him and Lewis Hamilton basically swapped. So he jumped in Lewis Hamilton's F1 car. Lewis Hamilton jumped on his MotoGP bike. And they went around Silverstone and they sort of showed each other the ropes. Rossi's that talented that he could potentially be, if not a Formula One driver, then pretty close to one. He did a Formula One test for Ferrari when Michael Schumacher was at his peak. And he was only about a second or so slower than Schumacher, having just got in the car, which is mad. So, but to get into Formula One and be at the top of the sport, you need a lot of money, a lot of talent, and absolutely no fear whatsoever, because those guys are absolutely crazy. I mean, anyone who does motor racing is slightly unhinged, aren't they? But it's a crazy sport. So AJ might be able to get himself into sort of sports car racing, or maybe crowbar himself into something else. But there's no chance of him getting into Formula One. I don't want to crush his dreams.
No chance.
He has zero chance of getting Formula One. The only way he's getting into Formula One is if he sponsors a team. That's it. And he doesn't have enough money to sponsor a team.
I'll make you a deal, Simon, right? It's very unfair because it's more in my favor. But you recommended Drive to Survive. And I remember the day you said it, I did watch the first episode. I liked it, but I thought it was a big commitment. It scared me off. I'll go back and watch it. if you watch this ridiculous series that I think you might like.
Go on.
It was in the U.S. It's called Cart Life, and it only had one season, but it's kids that were trying to prepare to become these kind of drivers. So they go to all these different races, and their families take them, and they have their own little teams. And
A lot of pushy parents.
caught me. I actually watched it. I actually liked it. It's only one season.
I'll watch it. I'll tell you something I watched. I watched it last night. I binge watched it. It's on Sky Documentaries. It was called The Man Who Bought Cricket. I tweeted about it actually. It's on my timeline. You might have remembered the stories. A Texan billionaire called Sir Alan Stanford, and he was a billionaire, and he basically landed a helicopter outside Lord's cricket ground. The cricket is one of the stuffiest, old school, establishment kind of sports in the country, in the UK. It's a great sport, but lots of tradition. He pitches up in a helicopter and says, let's play one game of 2020 cricket, which is the shortened version of the game that can actually take place in one day. Test cricket can take 5 days and you can have a draw, right? The 2020 cricket is one day. And they wanted to play England. He wanted England to play against what he called the Stanford All Stars, which were the best players from the West Indies, from the Caribbean, which is where he was living at the time. And the winning team would get $20 million US. And it was the biggest single prize for a team sport at the time. And the whole thing was very vulgar to the cricket establishment. But while all this was getting put together, he was being investigated by the SEC and the FBI, and all of this was going on in the background. Apparently, he was involved in this massive Ponzi scheme, and that generated all of this money. And he got
Is it
locked
called
up.
Bitcoin?
No, this is long before Bitcoin.
Oh,
but he got put away for like 110 years or something.
jeez.
Yeah, he ain't coming out. Yeah, but it is an incredible story, and the documentary was over 3 1-hour episodes, and I just sat and watched them back to back last night, and it was amazing. So if you want something a little bit different, that's worth checking out. But yeah, I do like a sports documentary, so I'll definitely check out Cart Life. What streaming service is it on?
It was on True TV out here.
Okay,
but I'll look it up for you and see where you.
Careful, you two! Are you two about to share Netflix passwords?
We're not doing that now. I don't want to see his view. I don't want to see his watch history. I don't.
No, I kid, because I don't know if you guys heard, the Netflix stock dropped $130 just in one day. Their earnings report came out, and it was poor. I mean, they're still obviously a juggernaut, but they lost 20 million, 200 million, something subscribers, and then they're cracking down on this whole password share thing, and then of course you got Elon Musk tweeting stuff about it. But that is like unheard of for a stock like that. You got your Apples, IBMs, American Airlines, Exxon, the traditional powerhouses that doesn't happen. Netflix is to be included there, and now it was a big drop, and that a lot of that comes from my good friend Dave Manley, who was explaining that to me today, and I had seen some of those headlines going out. So are any of the ones you guys talking about on Netflix? I mean, it's still around, guys. Don't worry, it's not like they're closing up shop. But
Drive to Survive
is on Netflix. There's 4 seasons of it, and I can't recommend it highly enough. It's called Formula One.
Is there a good hooligan documentary that's come out in the last few years? I've already watched Football Soldier, Football Factory.
Not really.
Cam, I think wasn't there this badass dude named Cam or something like that from Arsenal?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of the films. There was a film called ID. That was another hooligan film. Green Street was another one.
Yeah, Green Street.
But yeah, they were never really my bag. I didn't really watch all that sort of stuff.
No?
I used to, no.
You're not one of the top boys over at Gills FC or nothing like that?
Nah. I'm very well behaved at football. I'm very well behaved.
Simon.
No, but I will say this: there is one on Netflix called Top Boy. It's not about hooliganism.
No, it's not. I've heard about that though.
It's good. I like 2 shows. I'm in 2 shows. I like it.
Yeah, definitely check out Drive to Survive. I can't recommend that highly enough. But just looking at the time, we spoke at the beginning of this that we'll try and keep it under an hour if we can. But before we wrap up, let's chuck a few predictions in, or a few. They don't necessarily have to be result based predictions. If you've got other sort of crackpot theories about what you're going to see in the rest of the week, then feel free to chuck them my way. So we got. Are you guys going to be across this one championship show on Friday? I know you quite often reference it on the radio. I mean, there's one fight on that card that leaps out, which is Jared Brooks, the Monkey God. He's actually in action this week, and he's up against a really talented fighter in Bokan Masinyane, who is undefeated. And if you check out his last fight, it was a stunning head kick knockout win. He's unbeaten. He's from South Africa. That's a big fight. If Brooks wins that, he's probably going to get a title shot. So that's one that's worth checking out. That'll be pretty early for you guys, I would imagine.
Yeah,
because it's kind of lunchtime. My time is when they kick off. So you're 8 hours behind me. So I would imagine you're going to be just about putting your first coffee on for the day by the time Jared fights, because he'll be towards the end of the card. So,
well, that we actually we called a card in Japan one time for World Series of Fighting Global, and Jared Brooks was on that card. And I remember because we were in our tiny little rooms, and I could hear all this noise in the hallway, and I go out and he's just hitting mitts in the hallway. And man, he had a big mouth then, and that mouth has gotten even bigger now. But he delivered, and that fight was at 115 back then, so he's a small cat, but he's a good fighter. I think he's just kind of his own worst enemy sometimes. But I would tune in for that. And that One Championship app makes it so easy, on your phone. So definitely, I would check that out.
Yeah, and
I would echo what Goze
as well.
Yeah, for that reason alone, just because we called this fight at World Series of Fighting Global in 2016, definitely tune in. One Championship, it's hot and cold. Sometimes when they load up the card, we're in. The app is so easy. You just roll over at 5 a.m. and turn it on, and it's a great picture. And we consider Michael Chavello a friend. He lived here for about 10 years. We used to play trivia night with him on Tuesdays over at the Mulligan's Irish Bar, and so that was a blast. But this one's probably just, like you said, top-heavy main event. Probably tune in for that. Arguably, that is the best strawweight male fighter on the planet, Brooks is. And he's got great wrestling, and he can crack. So it hasn't surprised me one bit that, he can hold his own at 125. But we're literally talking about a guy that we saw compete at 115. That's amazing. I was 115 at my fifth year birthday. That's the last time I was 115. But anyway, I can't kid you. Like that would be it, and it'll be PFL for me. Then there, both Bellators, but top heavy Bellators. I want to see that Grand Prix. I want to see Cyborg. Kyoji Horiguchi versus Patchy Mix. That's going to be awesome. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And bantamweight is. I keep preventing myself from saying it's my favorite division, but I think I've just come to the realization it is, because it's so dope. Not just at Bellator, the UFC's got some great bantamweights. And a long time ago, I remember a guy named Reed Kuhn. He did the Fight-nomics, right? His book.
Reed Kuhn, yeah.
And he said one thing that stood out to him was bantamweights finish fights at a higher rate when it comes to TKOs than featherweights. You looked at the graph and it went like this. Obviously, the heavyweights, they're going to end mostly in KOs compared to some of the lightweight classes. But there was a little movement, that little rare movement of the 35ers. You know what I mean? That they just, maybe we were blessed with the time that we had some heavy-handed bantamweights. But I've always cheered for him, man, even going all the way back to the great Miguel Torres and, Dominic Cruz and, all the different eras that we're in. So many of them, like Cruz and Edgar, and I'm not even sure if Edgar's done, but Aldo, they've all finished up as bantamweights. And then you got Jan and Sterling, a great rivalry. And then you got all those veterans like Marias, who just retired, and Jimmy Rivera started off 20-1, I think, in his career.
Yeah.
Sun Sal, he's been punching the clock for a long time. So I love that division, and I love that Bellator got around to it. So I'm hooked on that for sure.
I love their Grand Prix. I love the fact they still do them, and I think the bantamweight division is the best division for it right now. They've got such a depth of talent, and I think the two quarterfinals that effectively are that we're going to get at Bellator 279. I think the two winners, because they're on opposite sides of the bracket, I think those two winners will eventually meet in the final. I really do. I think looking at the way it's set up, and if I was picking it, I'd probably say it'd be Horiguchi versus Rafian Stotts. I think I really like Stotts in this fight against against the Spaniard.
Archuleta?
Archuleta, yeah.
Yeah.
It's Archuleta's good everywhere, but Stotts to me just has that little bit extra. And the way he handled Magomedov really impressed me, because I've seen a lot of Magomedov. And for him to do what he did, I knew he would have the striking edge, but for him to handle him in the wrestling department was super impressive. I think he's the man to beat in this tournament, even over Horiguchi possibly. So Horiguchi's got a point to prove. So that's going to be a really interesting one, because Patchy Mix is no slouch. He's legit. So who's your money on for the tournament, Goze?
I like Stotts. I'm probably going to still lean Horiguchi. Remember, Stotts is out here in Vegas now, because at the time Pettis was in the tournament, they didn't want them together in the same place. But I like Stotts. I think I'm going to go Horiguchi, though.
What about you, George?
I'm going to go with Stotts. I think the wrestlers are built for these quick turnaround Grand Prix. And I like where his mindset is at. Like, if you ask him a few months ago, we were like, hey, have you beat Mix? Are you next? And he was taking things in stride. And those fighters that are like so relaxed, so composed, so calm, are the ones that appear to be the most dangerous. His only loss, I believe, is at Victory Fighting Championships. I don't know if you guys recall the four-sided cages. Ryan Stoddard used to be the promoter, and he got caught by a spinning back elbow, if I'm not mistaken. But other than that, he's handled himself great. I think he's a great athletic phenom. And I can't say enough about Horiguchi. I could see him going far as well. That would be my backup choice. I have argued that Horiguchi is the greatest mixed martial artist to come out of Japan. Not the most famous, not the most influential, not the one that carries the most weight or Godfather, because all respect to Sakuraba and many of the others that came before him. But just successes alone, he's amazing. He's won Grand Prix, titles. They've done the whole Rise in Bellator back and forth. 8-1, Simon Head. 8-1 in the UFC. You can't even go, well, what if he were to go to the UFC? He only lost to DJ, and DJ is, one of the goats of the sport. So that to me just tells that, I close my case. I just think Horiguchi is the best Japanese mixed martial artist ever.
And when he fought DJ, he was still a kid. He was still relatively young in the sport. And
why the UFC didn't keep him? I consider that a mistake.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's a standard bearer for Japan as well. He would have opened some doors. They'd have had a star on their hands, just like they've got with Zhang Wei Li. He could have done a similar job in Japan. You mentioned that one loss from Patchy Mix. Merab Dvalishvili was the guy who knocked him out.
Yeah, that's right.
So, I think it was Ring of Combat. Was it Ring of Combat?
Oh, was it? Okay, I got it wrong. I'm sorry.
I know Ring of Combat it was.
Did his thing at Victory Fighting Championship for a long time. But yeah, it was a spinning
back.
He
had one fight in between. Yeah, there was a load of I'm just looking at his record. He had a whole load of fights for Victory FC, and then in the middle of them, he had a fight for Ring of Combat, and he got 15-second knockout, spinning back fist.
Yeah, and he's as we can see, he's no slouch. A lot of people are talking about possible Jan versus Dvalishvili now. So those are the two guys that I like, but if I'm picking one, it's Stotts.
Yeah, and before we wrap up, let's just quickly nail our colours to the mast for this main event. Cris Cyborg, Arlene Blencowe. Cyborg's probably pretty much an unbackable favourite in this, but the thing I find really interesting was, for everything we've seen from Cris Cyborg in her career and the way she's gone about her business in her career, she changed it up completely against Arlene Blencowe and submitted her, went for the submission route. And we'd not seen that before. I think that might have been her first career submission. Arlene Blencowe, her background is striking. It is boxing. Do you think Cris is going to go back to the grappling again, or are we going to see them going toe-to-toe a little bit more? Maybe, we've seen Cyborg has been rocked and beaten on her feet by Amanda Nunes. Is she being just a little bit more savvy and a little bit more smart these days? Now she's in Bellator. What do you think? Or do you think she'll just go in there back to the old berserker style and look to take her out quickly?
I think berserker. I think she's got a little bit of a chip on her shoulder with all this Kayla Harrison talk. I think she sees an opportunity with Amanda Nunes finally getting a loss to kind of just reinvent that mystique, that cyborg mystique that's been somewhat missing since that Amanda Nunes loss. I think she's out to prove a point this time.
Yeah. Now she has become more of a student, like not just going out there and unloading the way she used to, but she still can do that from time to time. But yeah, Goze took the words out of my mouth. Between Nunes' loss, which was what I was going to center my answer around, but yeah, also adding in all the publicity Kayla Harrison's gotten. Unfortunately, people will look at Kayla like, well, two-time Olympic gold medalist, she's the next thing. And Amanda Nunes, even though she lost to Juliana Pena, I think there's a lot of people still saying that wasn't the real Amanda. So I think Cyborg has gotten lost a little bit in that shuffle. And I think she's going to look to make a statement. So I think it could be a little bit of both. A lot of fighters will go out there and hurt you on the feet, and then they'll seize the neck or go for some sort of an opportunity to submit you. I'm not a big fan of that, especially when I bet it and I have an under. If you're rocked, finish them, for crying out loud. Just be more measured and surgical, but I get it. They don't want to empty the tank. But I think both can possibly happen, but I think you'll definitely see her explode against Arlene Blencowe at some point.
Yeah, I think it's with all respect to Arlene Blencowe, who's getting a second shot at the featherweight title. It's hard to see a path to victory for her on Saturday, but it's always interesting when Cris Cyborg fights. She's just a dominant athlete in the sport, and I still don't think she gets the credit she deserves. It's really weird. I think they kind of played her off as like the almost like the bad guy, during the whole Ronda era. There was a lot of comparisons there. Ronda was the poster girl, and Cyborg was the one getting the hate. And I always thought that was a little bit harsh. But yeah, I think she deserves all the credit that she gets at this stage in her career. And we will see what happens on Saturday night. It's a packed week, as I say. By the time you've picked this show up, PFL will be in the books. One championship will be hot on the heels on Friday night, or on Friday during the day. Bellator 278 Friday night, Bellator 279 Saturday night, and then UFC also on Saturday night. Very, very quickly, who wins the main event? Amanda Lemos versus Jessica Andrade. Is it the experience or is it the up-and-coming contender? What do you reckon?
I'm going to give you a pick for Saturday night and throw in a bonus. I say Andrade is going to win, because she is just tough everywhere, honestly, on the ground, on the feet, seasoned at 35, 25, 15. I mean, former champ. Can't say enough about her. Lemos is legit, don't get me wrong, but I have to pick somebody. So her, and I'm going to throw in a bonus. I think Clay Collard gets it done against Jeremy Stephens. I may have turned in Stephens as my pick, and now I wish I switched it around. But I think after talking so much about what happened to Verdum and all the guys earlier, I'm starting to lean towards Clay Collard tonight. So I'm giving you a bonus there. How about that?
What do you reckon, guys?
I think Clay Collard is a good pick, just because Jeremy Stephens is really wild. And I think the boxing that Clay Collard, his style, can kind of supersede that. But as far as that main event, man, I've gone back and forth with that. And sometimes I feel like I hold the old guard a little bit too tight, and I don't give these up-and-comers their respect. But I do feel like Jessica Andrade is just the more well-rounded fighter. And I think that's what's going to get her the W. So I'm going to stick with her.
Yeah, I'm going with the same, because I just think you take a look at the body of work. There's more there. There's more skins on the wall, right? And we've seen her proven at that top level. It's Lemos' first main event as well, so we'll see how that goes for her as well, particularly if it goes past that third round. So, although I don't think it will. I think betting the under might be the way forward on that one. But yeah, it's going to be a packed weekend of fights, and it's been good getting around the international coffee table with you and having a bit of a chat. It's been great having you on, and hopefully we can make this a regular thing. Before we wrap up, let everybody know everywhere, because you're all over the place these days, how everyone can keep up to date with absolutely everything you guys are doing, which is a lot.
Okay, so Simon, before we wrap up, I also want to get a Collard Stevens prediction at you. But yes, you can catch us Mondays and Thursdays at MMA Junkie. That's where the show drops. Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or our home, which is Omni Podcasts. Sometimes we do it Sunday night, Wednesday night for early delivery, taking into consideration the UK, the European audience, the Oceania audience, getting it in their hands earlier. And then we've started doing a lot more video. That was one of the pros that came out of the con of not being a daily show on SiriusXM anymore, is we started doing more work on video. So one of the ones that we're very proud of is our weekly spinning back click franchise. You can get that at youtube.com/MMA Junkie video. And there's where you'll also see the full interviews that we do with fighters, because oftentimes we'll do interviews and they'll do video highlights from that interview along with the recap that we post on Junkie, and you'll miss out on a lot of other fun, cool stuff that we, unpack with the fighters, sometimes just about their personal lives, things going on with Instagram. So check us out at youtube.com/MMA Junkie video. I'm at MMA Junkie George. Goze is the Goze on Twitter and Instagram, man. And it was great to be part of this international coming of forces. I love the intro. I even got chills when I saw those two powerful flags at the beginning, man. That was awesome.
There we go. Yeah, no, it's great to be doing it with you. You want a prediction? I'm going with Cassius Clay Collard. I think it'll be late or it'll be on points. I think he'll just jab him his way through the early rounds and either pick him apart late on or he'll get the judge's decision. But yeah, give me the boxer over the puncher. So I think he just
needs to watch those leg kicks, because Stevens has added leg kicks to his repertoire. But I think if he can dance around those, his hands should be cleaner.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun night. I'm looking forward to that. We've got so many fights to watch between now and the next time we talk. It's going to be a busy old few days. So I'm looking forward to it. Thank you to everyone for checking this one out. And you'll be able to catch some more from the Brit Pack. We've got a few more things up our sleeve that I'm working on. And I'll bring those to you in the coming days and weeks. But for the first episode of the Brit Pack United Nations, thanks for checking us out. And we'll speak to you in a week's time.